I mean, perimenopause did not even enter a conversation at all because
Mm,
of my age, most likely. It was
yeah.
early. And there were so many other comorbidities that were happening at the same time
Mm,
that it was
yeah.
hard to differentiate what was what and where was it coming from.
Welcome back to the Holistic Hormones Podcast with me, Dr. Ami Patel, pharmacist and hormone consultant. I've transformed my pain, struggle, and journey with managing my PCOS into my passion to support women to gain freedom from their hormone imbalance symptoms. On this podcast, I share practical tips that have worked for me and my clients, as well as conversations from experts in their field. Today is a guest episode, and I have the honor to have Terry Tateossian.
Yeah, you can call me TT.
with Terry today. So thank you so much for being here today, Terry.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Patel. I can't wait to dive into this topic.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be so good. Before we do that, I do want to do a little bit of an introduction of Terry. So, going back a little bit into Terry's story, which she will definitely tell us a little bit more about in our conversation, but Terry was an entrepreneur. She founded multiple businesses. She coached and mentored dozens of employees. She helped Fortune 100 brands develop marketing strategies and produce award-winning campaigns. And she won dozens of business awards and gave birth to two beautiful children. But despite all this, she was feeling hopeless about herself because of being obese at that time. She was 5'3" and weighed over 210 pounds, and she couldn't figure out the secret to losing weight and maintaining it. She tried everything out there, like many of us that are listening to this have as well, right? Keto, Atkins, juice cleanses, diet pills, trying vegan, vegetarianism. And she lost some weight, but it came back with vengeance, gaining that weight back, plus sometimes even more, double that. So it's a vicious cycle, and she couldn't figure out how someone like her, who's working very hard, intelligent, resourceful woman, couldn't figure out her body. And then she realized that her problem wasn't physical. And then from that, she finally broke free from the weight gain and loss roller coaster. And today we're going to talk about what she learned in her journey. But before we do that, so now Terry is the founder of the House of Rose. She spends her time focusing on coaching women into regaining their confidence, igniting their wellness, and finding their true purpose through strength, training, nutrition, and mindset. And she's passionate about fitness, which has propelled her to start Thor Retreats as a place where individuals can kickstart their journey into well-being while being surrounded by the magnificent Cherokee National Forest and Smoky Mountains. And just a little bit more about some of the accomplishments Terry has had. She's been recognized in Inc. 5000's Fast Growing Companies in America in 2020, Inc. 2020 Best Places to Work, New Jersey Biz Top 40 Under 40, Future 50 Fastest Growing Companies, YPO 50 Fastest Growing Women-Owned and Led Business Companies, Top 25 Leading Women Entrepreneurs, Top Female CEO, Bravo Award winner, and Best Company Culture, and Top Women to Watch by Hudson MOD. So wow, Terry, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today to share your knowledge and expertise with us.
It's my absolute honor. I love talking about these topics. So
yeah, and like so many, similar to your story, many of the listeners, we can all relate to this, and there isn't enough conversation about these things. So I am really happy that we're having this conversation. And can you tell us a little bit more about like how your journey was and how you turned that why into what you do today and how you got started into this?
absolutely. So at about the age of 37, which was a little bit over 10 years ago, I found myself at 210 pounds at 5'3". I was extremely stressed, overwhelmed, anxious. I was obese. And I just had absolutely no mind space to get control of my own body. I felt completely hijacked by everything that I was doing. I had zero idea and notion on how to manage my own weight. And, naturally that leads into a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, overeating, binge eating, emotional eating.
Yeah.
I found myself in the hospital twice thinking I was having a heart attack, which runs in my family. But I ended up being sent home with Xanax both times and told to go see a
Mm.
cardiologist. I
Wow.
found out I had 18 ovarian cysts, heart murmur, pre-diabetic markers. I mean, everything was
Wow.
just breaking all at the same time. And eventually I figured out that the leading cause of a lot of my symptoms and my issues was most likely perimenopause and also being extremely overweight, about 80 pounds. And so I
Yeah.
went on this mission and this quest. I had to lose the weight, and it wasn't just for aesthetic purposes. It was really for my life. I had to
Yeah.
figure out how to save my own life.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And it's like you said, save your own life. A lot of times that sense of responsibility also has to be there, right? That like, hey, I need to do this for myself, for my own physical well-being, and just to even feel good on the day to day. Like I'm sure you did not feel like energized or anything like motivated or just like you said, more than just looking good, but just like feeling good.
Absolutely. And the way that I was coping with not feeling good, I was miserable, really. I wasn't just
Yeah.
not feeling good. I was miserable. I was very moody, irritable, anxious, cranky. I had very low self-esteem. And this was all happening and I was operating this way while running a company with a lot of
Mm.
employees and clients. And I just had to sweep everything under the rug and keep moving every day. But that was exhibiting itself. It was manifesting itself,
Yeah.
a lot of overeating.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know what your experience was when you went to the providers. Like, did they just tell you, like, oh, just work out more, eat less, just lose weight? Or were you like actually given more guidance on how to start managing your health? I mean, you said they gave you a prescription and then, sent you off on your way, but
The majority of replies was get used to it. This is what it's like to get old.
what? That's horrible. Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
That was the
Wow.
the general response. A few people would say, you should probably lose weight, but that was very far in between. The the most common reaction was a prescription.
Mm. So then how did you realize that it was perimenopause that you were approaching or in?
I really didn't. I was completely clueless. And when I say clueless, I really mean it didn't even dawn on me that it could have been perimenopause. It did not. I had zero self-awareness at the time. I was so busy and overwhelmed with work, running a business,
Mm,
2 children, family, aging parents, all these things all at the same time.
yeah.
So zero self-awareness. I overate on a regular basis. I continue to gain weight out of control. And then perimenopause showed up in my house unannounced and uninvited. And I had no idea what was going on. I actually mistook it for other things. Like I got paranoid. I thought, what is happening? This is
Yeah.
not normal. I had a very hard time sleeping. I started having extreme hot flashes at odd, weird
Wow.
moments. And I would joke around with friends and, say, hey, I think I'm in heat. Like, I don't know what's going I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But looking back at it now, it wasn't really in my mindset because I thought I was too young to be in starting perimenopause. I was 36 and a half, 37.
Yeah. That's a good point. So then what was like the light bulb moment when you realized and connected all the dots that, hey, like it is perimenopause and like this is what I need to do now?
I'm a slow learner apparently because it took a while to figure that out. I actually figured it out after I had everything settled and corrected, and
Oh, that's
that's
so
when it
okay.
dawned on me in retrospect. Yes. But my main driver was that I had to lose weight because I had to feel better. I just couldn't live like that anymore. I
Hmm.
was very unhappy at 210 pounds. And I embarked on this journey of I'm going to figure it out no matter what. I'm going to get to the bottom of it and lose this weight once and for all. And in that process, I discovered I had an emotional binging problem. I
Mm.
had to resolve that. I had to figure out what how my habits and my behaviors were contributing to my weight gain or my inability to keep the weight off, because I could
Yeah.
always lose weight. That's the thing, right? I could always lose the weight. I just could not maintain the weight loss. So I constantly yo-yo dieted. But I suffered from the inability to have self-awareness for a really long time. And so I didn't figure it out until afterwards.
Well, you know, you say that, but the thing is, like, you were seeing healthcare providers in this time, and like, no one mentioned it to you either that, hey, it could be perimenopause, right? I mean, as like lay people, there's only so much we know about like medical conditions, and to an extent, you know, I feel like we rely on our providers to guide us sometimes, and unfortunately that doesn't always happen in the Western healthcare system, especially when it comes to women's health, which I know is like one of the reasons why we're both here today, is to like change the conversations around that. So I mean, you say that, but I feel like, you know, to an extent, it's not just all on you to figure out that this is what was happening to you, right?
Absolutely. I mean, perimenopause did not even enter a conversation at all because
Yeah.
of my age, most likely. It was
Yeah.
early. And there were so many other comorbidities that were happening at the same time
Mm,
that it was
yeah.
hard to differentiate what was what and where was it coming from. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. And you know, that's the other thing. It's like, oh, well, the pressing issue is like you're having like anxiety or you're having like the heart murmur. So we're not going to worry about your hormones right now. And that is like, I feel like, you know, the typical way, unfortunately, why women's hormones just don't get addressed. It's like, well, it's not as pressing as these other issues, when ultimately in our body, everything is connected.
Exactly, exactly. And it's incredible because our hormones they impact everything, right?
Yes,
They impact
exactly.
our
Yep.
behavior, our energy, our interest, our ability to have a life, our appetite, our sleep
Mm,
pattern. Um, whenever we have a symptom, let's say, which is inability to get good sleep, a lot of times that's really not the issue. That's just the manifestation of the core problem, which is most likely hormone related.
exactly. Yep, you hit the nail on the head right there. I love how you said that. I wanted to ask you, what's a brief like description between like knowing what perimenopause is and menopause, and like how does someone know that they might be entering into either of the phases?
Absolutely. So there are three stages of transition that we go through during menopause. The first one is perimenopause, and that's like a transitionary period where we'll experience a lot of different weird symptoms that we didn't have before. But it's a very gradual entrance into menopause or postmenopause. And some of the symptoms include irregular periods, different flow, hot flashes, lack of sleep, mood changes, irritability, anxiety, depression, lack of libido, lack of interest, lack of energy, all kinds of things that kind of snowball into a general feeling of just not feeling like yourself. And they can last for years. They can last a short time. It really depends on the woman. Everybody's very, very different. And what they're leading into is menopause, which is basically one day in your life, that's menopause. And that marks the time from when you have not had a period for at least 12 months. And so once you get through that 12-month period, so for some people it's less, for some people it's more. It really depends. But once you have not had a period for 12 months, you're considered postmenopausal. Now, the trick here is that these symptoms can continue into postmenopause for a little bit, but they should be a lot less severe.
Okay. That's a really great explanation. I didn't realize, I guess, that menopause was only like that 12-ish month time frame, and then technically you're considered postmenopausal. But okay, that makes sense. And then during all these changes that are happening, and from your own experience too, like why is it so important to have like proper nutrition and do resistance training through these different phases?
Absolutely. So during perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, there's a couple of key factors that take place, right? So our estrogen and progesterone levels start to drop, and we start to lose muscle mass a bit earlier than that. So we start to lose about 0.6 to 1% muscle mass starting from our 30s and going into our 40s. So in order to counteract our estrogen and progesterone levels going down and our muscle mass declining, having the right nutrition and proper resistance training are critical, really. They're crucial to continuing to feel better and to age well. So including the right nutrition, including the right adequate amounts of protein, including the right carbohydrates and the right vitamins and minerals into our diet on a regular basis helps to counteract these symptoms.
Thank you for being a dedicated listener and viewer. I would love your help in having this podcast reach more listeners so more women can become empowered about their hormone health, PCOS, and fertility. One way you can do that is by leaving a review. As a way to say thank you, I'd love to give you a free 45-minute one-to-one consultation. Inside the consultation, we can go over your medications, supplements, address any pressing questions you have, help you break out of your stagnation, or just get back on track. All you have to do is on Spotify, make sure you're following the show, then click the 3 dots on the right side and click rate the show and give it 5 stars. On Apple, make sure you're following, then scroll down to ratings and reviews and click write a review. Then just take a screenshot and email me at hello@dramiPharmacist.com. That's hello@DRAMIPHARMACIST.com. Thank you. And now back to the show. And I think I forgot to ask. So like, how did you actually lose the weight? Like, was it incorporating the proper nutrition and resistance training, like while you were going through this transition for yourself?
Exactly. It's like a miracle that keeps on giving. It's the gift that you used to give. So while I was going through perimenopause, and eventually I was actually became menopausal at the age of 42. I am almost 48. I haven't seen my period in over 5 years. It ghosted me. Perry left the house and did not come back. I miss her. I started to work on losing weight. And in this process, because it was such a cumulative experience, I started to feel better and better and better, My irritability went away. I was a lot more balanced. I had more emotional control. I generally had a sense of well-being. I
Yeah.
started losing weight. I wasn't regaining it. I addressed the fact that I had an emotional eating issue, which was caused by what I believe was emotional starvation. I was very unhappy. And so I was coping with that by eating a lot of Nutella ice cream and things like that. And so little by little, over the course of a year to 2 years, I started to lose weight. I kept it off. I strength trained 5 times a week. I did cardio, and I had my steps up to at least 8,000 steps per day. At the same time, I was eating in a macronutritional type of style of a diet. So what that means is there's a certain amount of protein I was eating per day. There were a number of carbohydrates that I was eating per meal per day, and a certain amount of fat that I was eating per meal per day. And it was broken down per meal. And that's what I was doing. Unbeknownst to me, though, this way of eating, this nutritional style, actually addressed a lot of hormonal issues that I was having. So not only was I losing weight and feeling really good about that, but I was also balancing my own internal hormones.
Yeah, and it's like, the case could be made both ways, that like because your hormones were starting to get balanced, you were able to lose the weight and keep it off, right? It works together. And like you were saying earlier, like ultimately, our hormones are what impacts everything. We didn't talk about this, but I know you got certifications for nutrition and like personal training. So is that like what you started, that like learning that and applying it to yourself? Is that how your journey started there?
Initially, no. Initially, I was just doing it. I
Oh.
actually didn't know if it was even going to work.
Yes, that's true. You said you were trying it like everything. You're like, oh, well, tried this. Okay, let me try the next thing.
Yes, I had probably gone over 30 different diets, every diet you can imagine out there. I had tried it. Everyone was it. That was the thing. Every strength
Hmm.
workout program, that was the thing. I would see an infomercial at 3 in the morning for an ab scissor, and it was miraculous. That ab scissor was at my house the next day, and it became a clothes hanger. I did it all. I tried everything, but I could never sustain it. And so when
Yes.
I think about it now, a lot of these, you know, posts that I see on Instagram and a lot of these commentaries about, when you're in midlife, you gain weight, and it's because you're this age, and that's what happens at this age. Well, that wasn't my experience, and that's not the experience with almost all the women that I work with, regardless of age. My theory is that the hormones that are fluctuating are creating a pattern or a new type of behavior or new type of mood that is then contributing to habits and behaviors that we didn't do in our 20s. The lack of energy that we may be feeling or the fatigue we might be feeling is changing the way that we're behaving, which is then causing us to gain weight.
Right, right. And it's like, naturally, like in our 20s, we have more energy, we can push through, right? But it's not the same when we get older. The other thing that I found interesting that you said is that, you had like, you said like emotional hunger, right? Is that what you said? And so actually I had another guest speaker on the podcast, Adrienne Youdim. She wrote a book, Hungry for More. And so she's a weight loss doctor, but in there she like really talks about how a lot of times we cope with food because we actually want other needs met, like whether it's like fulfillment in our relationships or just feeling good about ourselves. from other things, like self-esteem, right? And if those things are missing, that emotional hunger is there, then we turn to food as a replacement.
Exactly. So there are two types of foods: primary foods and secondary foods. Secondary foods are the actual physical nutrients that we take in physically. And primary foods are things like joy, happiness, satisfaction, love, intimacy.
Yes.
Those are the primary energetic foods. So when we're emotionally starved and we don't know how to meet our own needs,
Mhm.
we may turn to coping mechanisms such as alcohol, nicotine, drugs, porn,
Yeah.
gambling, shopping, eating,
Food.
which is the least offender, it may seem like in our minds, because it will not create any significant consequence in our lives with our family and friends, etc. And it's a very
That's a good
private
point.
type of behavior,
Mm,
right? It's very hard
yeah.
to call someone out like, hey, you've gained 50 pounds. Is everything okay? Like, people are not going to say that to us. But if we're drinking 3 bottles of vodka every night, it's going to be very apparent very quickly that we have an alcohol problem. But if we have a food addiction problem,
Right.
it's not that obvious, right? And so we can get away with it a lot easier. And it becomes a part of our coping strategy.
An unhealthy coping strategy, but yes, definitely. I can definitely relate to that too. And I like how you said that, it's more of a like a private thing, right? Like a lot of people may binge late at night, like no one is around, they may not see it. And ultimately all of those addictions, they give us that short-term dopamine release that gives us that satisfaction that we're trying to use as a replacement of like the primary food that you were mentioning, right? Those emotions that are lacking or that we feel are missing in our life. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. No, and that's such a good point. Like this is why like a holistic approach to managing our health is so important, right? It's more than just like focusing on like calories out is more than calories in and burning more than you eat, right? It's like all having all of these other things in our life, like managing stress, optimizing our sleep, in addition to the nutrition and the exercise.
Absolutely. I mean, energetic and emotional health, I think, are the
Yeah. Mhm.
area where we need to begin. And then everything else is a strategy, it's a tool, it's a gateway into addressing emotional starvation. So a lot of times we will start with, hey, I need to lose weight. How do I do it? Or I need to build muscle. How do I do it? What's the right training program, and what's the right nutrition plan, et cetera, et cetera. But what that leads us to ultimately is our emotional and energetic health, because without those two, we are going to keep failing the tactical part of it, because we're not going to be able to sustain the consistency required.
Yes, keywords right there. Sustainable and consistency. That is what, yeah, is definitely needed for the long-term results and maintaining those results, right? Because there's no point in some of these diets that you tried, right? Like the 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, like do these things, fine, you could do it. But then after that, if you can't be consistent with it, you can't sustain it, then the weight is going to come back, sometimes even double. Yeah,
Yes.
all relatable to me too, for sure. Like when I was going through some difficult times in my life, like I would turn to food, and I didn't have like healthy coping mechanisms at that time, and so food was a coping mechanism for me too.
Mhm.
But yeah, I feel like, these are like life skills that we all need to learn. Healthy coping mechanisms and emotional regulation, nervous system regulation. But yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, those are the soft skills that nobody really teaches us in
Hmm.
school. They
Yep.
they don't really spend any time teaching about energetic and emotional health. It almost seems like it's
Hmm.
irrelevant. Mental health is another aspect that's almost a taboo topic.
Yeah.
But a lot of us have a lot of mental habits or a mental condition that remain unrecognized. And we kind
Mm.
of use a lot of things to crutch our way through life without having the awareness or the knowledge on how to address the root cause.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And it's so great that, we can have conversations like this and like similar to other guests I've had, right? To allow people to know that, hey, like these are other things that we can learn that can help us manage our health. And they're just as vital as some of those things that we try to do, which is like, the eating well and the exercise, which is great, but all the other things matter too. I had one more question. Going back to your expertise of the nutrition and resistance training, what are some tips that you have around that for somebody who may be like not knowing where to start? What are some tips that they can do to get started?
Yeah, so if you are in perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, getting the right amount of protein is critical. Getting enough vegetables, vitamins, minerals into your diet through whole foods, through vegetables, through the
Mm,
right starches, through sweet potatoes, regular potatoes, white rice, things like that. It's critical. Having the right types of fats in your diet, right? So nuts, macadamia nuts, Brazilian nuts, regular nuts,
mm,
healthy oils, avocados, things like that is critical as whole foods. Supplements and protein bars and protein powders and any type of synthetic food, really, my recommendation would be to limit that as much as possible. So anything that comes in a bag, box, package, powders, wrappers, whatever, limit that to emergency only food so that you're not using them on a regular basis. Focus on whole foods, focus on lean proteins like
mm.
96% beef, 99% turkey, chicken breast, shrimp, whitefish, cod, things like that. And fill the rest of your plate up with broccoli, cauliflower, sweet potato, white rice, things like that. And then top it off with some kind of a flavor, right? So a healthy type of fat or a sauce that you may like, or olive oil or things like that,
Mhm.
and figure out what the right portions are for each of your meals. Try to stick to 4 to 5 smaller meals throughout the day, space them out three hours apart, and you will begin to see that you feel better over time. That portion is critical as well. Obviously,
Yeah.
you want to be in a calorically healthy place per day, not overeating, not undereating.
Yes. Hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely not under eating. I feel like a lot of us, I feel like at least like the women that I work with initially when they start working with me, most of them are under eating because they have just focused on like, okay, cut calories, cut calories, cut calories. And then, that in itself adds stress to the body and actually does the opposite effect of weight loss, which is you gain weight and keep that weight on. Yeah, that is a great point you make there about that. And then what about like the resistance training aspect? Any tips on that?
Resistance training is another critical aspect for perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. Again, it's actually really great if you're not in any of those stages as well to begin resistance training, because there is no downside to resistance training.
That's true.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So having enough muscle mass on your skeletal structure is great for maintaining bone health, for maintaining your body weight, for controlling insulin, for because of the decline of estrogen during perimenopause, osteoporosis is an issue. So
Mhm.
having a good framework for your lean muscle tissue is going to help counteract some of these conditions and symptoms that occur during peri phase of our lives. My suggestion would be to have a really smart, strategic type of strength training program that meets you where you're at, right? So every person is really different when they first begin. Some people have more experience than others. Other people have never worked out before. When I started, I did not know what the DB abbreviation was in my program. I looked up what DB meant. It was a dumbbell. I was a complete novice. I had no clue. And so my program had to reflect that, right? So if, for example, if you're somebody who's extremely obese, your program needs to reflect that as well. You know, like box jumps would not be something that should be included in your program. Most people, when they first start out, you want to be in a body weight type of exercises. You want to increase your steps. You want to incorporate a little bit of cardio, and then increase the intensity little by little as you develop more strength and as you get more muscles.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And yeah, I like what you said about like just doing body weight training because like, it's surprising to see that like just using our body weight in itself can work so many different muscles and build that strength up, and then adding the dumbbells or like resistance bands or anything else.
Absolutely. Body weight strength training is great when you're first starting out, that there is resistance in our body weight. So leveraging our own body is fantastic. Calisthenics are great as well. Mobility training is great as well. Anything that promotes movement, daily movement in our lives, I think you cannot go wrong. Walking is very underrated for health in general and for weight loss. So anything you can do to increase your daily movement is going to benefit you tremendously.
Awesome. Yes, I love that. Yeah, walking is very underrated. I mean, any movement that you enjoy is like a great place to start, even walking. So yes, that's very great. Before we wrap up, was there anything else you wanted to mention that we may not have covered?
Don't give up. Look for answers. If one practitioner is not giving you the answers, find somebody else. If you go to your regular doctor and they say, just get used to it, right? This is what happens at this age. Find somebody else. Find someone that's going to work with you and troubleshoot what's going on and get to the root cause, not just give you a magic pill, not just give you a Ozempic or give you some other magic diet that you cannot sustain. And the other thing is, if you are on a diet that you cannot sustain in the long term, don't start it. Find a lifestyle or find a nutritional strategy that you can maintain for the rest of your life, because that's what's going to take in order for you to maintain your weight loss.
I love that. Yep. So true. So true. And this just goes back to us talking about our hormones and getting the hormones balanced, right? Our hormones are with us up until menopause, right? They're with us. And so building that lifestyle that supports our hormones is what's going to help us in the long run. And it's like, I like to say, like, the more we support our body supports us. Like a lot of times we feel like we may be like fighting our bodies, or like, why is my body not working with me? But we have to also give our body the nutrition, the rest, the exercise that it needs to support it, and then it will support us.
Exactly.
Yes. Thank you. This was such a great conversation. I loved it. And what is the best way our community members can connect with you if they want to learn about your amazing retreats?
You can find me at thehouseofrose.com. All of our retreats are listed on the website. If you're interested in coaching, you can go to the same website, The House of Rose, and reach out to me. I love to chat with everybody who is going through this transitionary period. You can also find me on my Instagram. My handle is How Good Can It Get? And there is also a new podcast that we just launched, How Good Can It Get, on Spotify and Apple Tunes.
Awesome. Amazing. I'll include all that in the description and show notes. And for everyone listening, as always, be kind to yourself, be patient, and focus on progress, not perfection.